there's three of us in Lahore, and Oves, the doctor, he's in Peshawar.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Your knowledge about Pakistan is exceptional, Jamie. You want to tell us how that comes about?
Yeah, I went away for a year before I did this job. When I was about 26, I went away for a year. I went to India, I went to Pakistan, I went to China. I went to China over into Kashgar, the sort of Silk Road.
Yeah.
So I came in Pakistan. I think I mentioned I went to see Islamabad, Hunzavali, Gilgit, and then into China. And then I came back when I was actually working in this job. Well, before I did football, I did all sport. Pakistan played India in Multan for the first time in Pakistan in 1989.
Yeah,
a test it was.
Yeah.
And I went and did that in 2004. So that's why I've been to Multan as well.
Yeah, that's where my dad's from.
Is that right?
Yeah, awful game. We got thrashed. Jeez, bringing back some bad memories.
That's right. Yeah, because didn't the two Indian openers get double centuries, or one of them?
One of them
got a triple century.
Triple 100. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, you did get a bit hit around all over the park, didn't you?
Yeah, I drove down for that game. Spent the first day. He hit 300. I drove back to Lahore the next day. So I'm not staying for this story.
But it's when you got. When you go up into the Hunza Valley, it's beautiful up there. Wow. Because I was just there in sort of February times, the blossoms and, the mountains. And I was just like, I can't believe how nice this is.
Yeah, it's really gorgeous out there. It's gorgeous. Did you get to see Lahore at all?
I did. The Multan trip, I went to Lahore. What's the city, when you come in from India?
It's Lahore. It's Lahore.
Amritsar.
Yeah, Lahore, okay.
Yeah.
So, I saw... That's right, yeah. So
you could have crossed in from Kasur as well, or Sialkot.
I think
it's Vaga, right? The one where the
Vaga, that's right. Yeah, Vaga.
Yeah, that's Lahore.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because it was overland. I didn't fly, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. It should take 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Except if you're Indian or Pakistani, then it takes a year just to cross over.
I hear you.
Yeah, otherwise it's great. But yeah, thank you so much, Jamie. It's an absolute honor to have you here. We're all big fans.
Don't be silly. I'm it's very nice to be asked, basically. It's very kind of you. Thank you.
Jamie, we're going to go live in a few minutes. Is there anything you wouldn't want to discuss? Anything is fine.
Of course, yes, of course.
Maybe.
Do it, like whatever you want to ask me. Let's do it. Let's have some fun, yeah?
Okay, just let me set it up, and you can talk to the guys until then. Just 2 minutes.
Okay, so it goes out over YouTube Live. Is that how you do it, or Facebook?
Facebook Live, and then the recording comes up on YouTube in a couple, maybe half an hour or so after that.
Quality.
Yeah. It's getting great response. I think we've kept the fans in Pakistan, informed.
Yes.
It's great.
How long have you been going as the official fan club? Was it 2014, did I read, or have I got that wrong?
Yes,
No.
I think. Yeah, United told us to get 50 people. I think we showed up with 80. We're about 150 strong now.
Yes.
Across the country, and fully paid up members. Including our children. My 3-year-old is an official fan. So is Ismail's 2-year-old.
Okay.
And we have screenings across Islamabad, Karachi, Lahore. Whenever we can, we all get together and meet up with each other. We surprise the locals when we won the FA Cup. Driving around with our flags, and they're like, "What's going on here?"
Under Van Gaal, yeah.
Under Van Gaal, drove around there, and
nice one. I like it.
We got an official letter from Louis Van Gaal welcoming us. Had Ander Herrera send us a nice video message.
Very nice. Yeah, it's a nice club. I can tell you, being lucky enough to cover them, it's a nice club. I've done this job for about 8 years, and the people there at United are very nice. I have to say, considering it's a massive operation and all the rest of it, they are very, very nice. It's a nice place to go and sort of,
and
work.
It's been really nice to connect with, fan clubs in Iraq, for example, and we've connected with fan clubs in India. It's been really great to, share those things. And every time you're traveling, I know I've had this when I've been to Dubai, when I've been back to the UK. You just message one of the official clubs and say, "Hi guys, I'm here. Can you help me out?" And they help you out with the screenings.
Yeah, that is nice. So you've been to Old Trafford then?
I've been 5 times now over the years. I grew up in London.
Okay.
Yeah, between there and Pakistan, and so my first game was Leeds away. Leeds at Old Trafford. This is right after their players attacked that Asian guy in the city centre, if you remember.
It wasn't very nice at all. Yeah.
So the police in Manchester decided they had to give me an escort because I was too obvious, they said.
Okay.
They said, you're too obvious. And I said, it's a little bit late for me to change my ethnicity. And they said, no. So they actually put me in a car and drove me to the train station. I was taking the train back to Stafford where I went to uni.
Yeah.
And then one of the gentlemen had to accompany me. It was great. I felt like a person,
So that was sort of early 2000s then, that game,
Yes,
right?
2002, 2003, yeah.
Okay. Well, so they won the league that season, didn't they, United?
We did indeed, yes.
Yeah, because then there was a 3-year gap, was there? A 4-year? It was the biggest gap, wasn't it?
After that. Yeah, then there was a gap. Then there was Arsenal, and then 2 to Chelsea.
Yeah.
And then, then of course, we brought Michael Carrick, and nothing was ever the same, was it?
Until whereabouts in London are you from?
So North London, if you go up to Enfield,
yes,
just Middlesex country, and then my grandparents moved out to Edgware Road.
Oh,
because
nice.
they thought, where can we be, inconspicuous, fit in with everybody else? So that's where the family home is.
Yeah, I know London. I lived there. I was born there, and I lived there for when I went to university, I moved there, and I lived there for 19 years basically until I we moved back up here. So it's a good city. It's a good city. I like it.
It's a great place. Great place. I was due to be there this time around. I had my tickets and everything booked, and then when this hit, I said, no, I should be a little bit careful.
How is it in Pakistan with it?
It's very bad.
Yeah, it's bad. Uves is a doctor. He's the person to talk to.
Yes.
Oh, it's very bad here. People are not listening to what we are saying. A lot of people still believe it's a conspiracy theory.
Right.
And it's just here. And like I went for grocery shopping today, and literally 90% of the people weren't wearing masks. They weren't following social distancing.
Oh.
We already have like 45,000 cases. It's in the top 5 new cases in the world. So may God help us.
Not great. Not great at all.
And we've had 7,000 plus people who were stranded here from the UK because they come over at this time for the Easter holidays.
Right. Okay.
Had them flown back. So yeah, it's been surreal. But hopefully it goes away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jamie, we're live right now. Okay. First of all, thanks for coming on, and thanks for being obviously. Many of us have been following your work, and not just myself, who is also a big fan of yours. Yeah. So we discussed from time to time that Jamie wrote this, so it's reliable. Jamie said that, so it's good.
That's very kind.
Me and OS, we keep talking about it. So thanks for coming on. And as you told me, you visited Pakistan as well. So we'll start off with that. Okay. So how was your experience?
Yeah, I loved it. I was there, as I was saying earlier, kind of February 1998. I came across overland from India, and I spent about a week, maybe a little bit longer in Islamabad. And then I went up to the Hunza Valley, Gilgit, and I was waiting for the Karakoram Highway to open into China, into Kashgar that way. And it wasn't open until May. So I think I spent about 5 or 6 weeks in a place called Karimabad, a village in the Hunza Valley. And as I was saying earlier, it was absolutely gorgeous. One of the best things is, which you don't need me to tell you, but you're cricket mad there. And I played cricket every day with the villagers. The tape ball, where they sort of, I think they taped half of the ball. But what I loved about it, amongst many things, was they loved it so much that people would even umpire. So you had 11 aside, plus you had, umpires, and it was just taken. I play cricket with my son who's 8 here, but you do not get the numbers like I certainly experienced there in Karabakh. So I did that. I was writing because I've always written fiction novels or tried to. So I was writing that, and I remember I had a copy of Anna Karenina, the Tolstoy book. I think I read that twice because I was there 5 or 6 weeks. I only had 2 books, so I had the Karenina. I read that twice, and I had another book. And I just sort of got to know the locals. And at that time, it was spring, the blossoms. It sort of sort of the way the valley was, you could sort of see down quite a way. Just very beautiful, a great experience, basically.
That's good to hear. So we can start off with Trad. You can go first with your question.
All right. First of all, thank you, Jamie, for joining us. This is a very pressing question and something we all deliberate amongst ourselves. But what we'd like to hear from you is, how does a transfer story break? Do clubs brief journalists, or do player agents leak information, or do their relatives, leak information to the media? And amidst all the speculation and, the craziness of the transfer window and how it unfolds, how do you actually pick up on what is actual and factual and what has been made up amongst all those rumors?
Do you know what? It's a really good question, or sort of two-part question. One way of answering is when I used to live in London and cover sort of clubs down there, I used to do some guest lecturing on sports journalism, and it was specifically on this, on how do you report transfer news. And what you just said then is absolutely essential and makes it so difficult, because there's so much. What I always used to say to the students there was that something that could be genuinely true when you report it, or when you are told it, let's say, might not be 5 minutes later. It's not that the information was wrong, or that you're not telling the truth. It's actually changed. This is one of the reasons why managers, it's not the only reason, but one of the reasons why managers don't like to be drawn publicly on transfers, because they could look sort of stupid, or look like they're misinformed, or make the club look like it's sort of missing out on players. So in terms of sources, yeah, it can be all sorts of people. It can be agents, it can be clubs if they want certain piece of information out. Don't get me wrong. Let's take an example. Say Harry Maguire last summer. The last thing United did and would ever do, or any club, is sort of say they're in for that guy, on or off the record, and this is what we're doing. They just don't do that, because apart from anything else, it's a business transaction. And, if you're saying, there's two reasons why. If you're saying, why you don't want to make it public, really, it drives the price up if you let, the club that the player is at that time, know that you're interested in. But also, if competitors, if another club wants Harry Maguire in this example, then you're kind of letting them know what your tactics are. So, I mean, sources could vary across the board. You basically, it can be agents. It can be a club if it's a particular part of a. So where a club might give you some information is kind of after the fact. So let's say, take Maguire again, or Wan-Bissaka, or it could be Fernandes. Any player, name any, Van Persie all those years ago. You might want the correct price out there, for example. So let's take Van Persie. So let's say Arsenal had been briefing. This didn't happen, but it's an example that, we got 50 million for him. Well, then they, United might think, no, we don't want to be seen, because that again drives up the market price. Because apart from anything else, there's a kind of, it's a rough way of calculating, but there's an extra premium on United when they go and buy players, because they're Manchester United and they're so much richer. You can almost say there's like a 10% premium that selling clubs try to get. So, that's the reason why in that example I'm giving you about, say, Van Persie, they might brief that, I think it was 22 at the time, 22 and a half, maybe with an extra if they won the league. So they might give out that info. So going into an actual deal occurring, it's not really going to come from the club. It may well come from agents, but there are agents, of course, so when I say agent, I don't just mean the agent of a player. You have agents who act for clubs as well. So it could be the selling club. So it kind of varies, but they are an absolute minefield to report on, and that's why you have to use your judgment a lot. It's sort of, I think this is correct, but I'm not completely sure. So there's no point really reporting that, because what is the point if it might be wrong? There's just, I don't, people have different ways of doing it, but that's kind of what I'm describing there is a good way. Maybe gives you a little bit of a sense of the sort of difficulties involved.
Okay, Jamie, I have a follow-up question. Since FIFA does not allow players to meet other clubs, it's against the rules without the permission of their parent club. There was a recent interview by Unai Emery who said that I met Zaha about a potential transfer to Arsenal. So how does that happen? Like, how do players meet other managers before the club agrees a fee?
Well, they can't. Listen, I don't know at all about that example, but if he said that, that's interesting. There might be a scenario there. I'm hypothesizing where Palace have actually said to Zaha, "Look, you can meet him because we're open to a sale." So he might have got permission that way, but it wouldn't be made public. Do you know what I mean? So that's maybe where that happens. I mean, one way or another, if Club A wants to buy, Joe Bloggs from Club B, and it's very rare. It does happen. I think Southampton maybe reported Liverpool over Van Dijk the summer before, maybe the January moved. It does happen but often, clubs do try to keep to the rules. And as I say, there are scenarios whereby they can meet them or they can talk to them. If again, if you take that example, again, I don't know if this has happened, but Palace wouldn't want that. Palace wouldn't want their fans to know that they've maybe said to Zaha, oh, you can speak to Emery because we're open to a sale. So it would be made public, but they know it's happened. Sort of. Again, I've got to stress, I don't know if that's what occurred, but that's maybe the kind of scenario that could allow that to happen.
But is it a norm for players to meet without their club's permission? Like, does that happen usually?
Not in my experience. No, I mean, I have to be honest. I don't have oversight or sight of everything that goes on in the deal. But it's quite where you might get it more is with managers. So sorry, just answer your question more clearly. I don't think players really meet other managers before it gets to a point where they're allowed to. Maybe with managers, if you want to have a manager and he's in employment, possibly. But even then, it is quite rare. Usually, permission is asked. I'm trying to think of an example. I mean, I'm thinking of Van Gaal when he was approached to be United manager. I think he was Holland manager. And in that scenario, he hasn't got a club, right? Obviously, because he's the manager of Holland. So therefore, I think they went to see him at his place near Amsterdam, where he basically lives. And that's an example where there's nothing wrong with that because he's not a manager of a club. But I think generally, I'm not saying 100%. I think generally clubs do try and do it the correct way because if not, as we saw with the Van Dijk thing, if the selling club or who the player belongs to, if that club is not happy, they do have redress to sort of complain. And it's a little bit embarrassing, basically, if that occurs.
Okay, so Jamie, I'll go next. Obviously, there are some journalists who pride themselves on breaking a story first. Others who pride themselves on getting the story right, actually. So what has been your biggest scoop so far? I know you've been co-working with Fabrizio Romano as well, who is quite famous among the United circles as well. So yes. How has that experience been like?
Yeah, no, he's very well informed. The sort of biggest recent story I got was, do you remember, so in August of Mourinho's last season, I did a story saying that United were going to have their first ever director of football.
Yeah.
In their history. I think, I don't know, whatever it was, 140 years. So that was quite a big story because, City have one. I think Chelsea have some kind of entity that's, a similar idea. But United never had one. And for years, whenever, I would ask people who would know that, the answer was always no, we're just not interested. So I have to say, when I was told that, yeah, we're going to look at one, I was surprised and I had to check it 2 or 3 times just to make sure. And that's a good example, actually. So that, we're talking about how do you report transfer stories. Well, that, if you're going to say Manchester United are looking for a director of football, you better be right about it, because if not, the first thing that's going to happen is the club are going to be on the phone to you saying, what are you doing? Because what happens is you do a story like that and reporters from other news organisations, football reporters, the first thing they do is call the club, is it true? So, the club, apart from everyone else, have to, if it's not correct, they're having to field a lot of calls. It goes all around the world because it's Manchester United. So that's probably a good example of the most recent one. You see, so that's, when was that? That's like coming up 2 years ago, that right? And that sort of shows how rare these really big stories are, because they don't, that sort of occurrence doesn't really happen that much anyway, to be the first time you ever hire it. That's one reason why they're rare. But secondly, you have to be careful. You have to be very, very careful. I could think of stories that I haven't done because due to the need to be careful, and they turn out to be correct. And when I was a bit younger, I've been a reporter, a sports reporter for 18 years. When I was a bit younger, that used to sort of frustrate me a bit. Oh, why didn't you do it? But as I've got older, I've just felt, well, you didn't do it for the right reason because you want to try and be correct. It doesn't always happen, you can. But yeah, so that's that's a really good example. And yeah, I mean, Fabrizio is very, very well informed, and he's a very, very good operator. And he's a great addition, obviously, to the Guardian and the Observer, the Sunday paper. And I mean,
you're going to have to put in a word for us, actually, but we'll ask that favor at the end.
I think he's been reporting for us for about 3 years now. And yeah, I mean, I can't remember a story, he's got wrong. I mean, at the Guardian, it's quite a high bar. I mean, they don't,
absolutely.
It has to be correct, really.
I think the only story him and Di Marzio have gotten wrong is that the Roma defender who went to then Bayern Munich. I forgot his name. He was Moroccan.
Benatia.
Right. Mehdi Benatia, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Did he report that he was coming to United?
Yeah, I think that was the only one. That was the only one.
Right, okay. I mean, to be honest, I can't remember that being a story, so I'm gonna play that card.
No worries. Jamie, I actually remember you breaking, or you being the first to report the Juan Mata rumors to United from Chelsea. I remember back in those days. So,
right.
Can you explain how that story broke and how it happened, if it's possible?
Yeah, I mean, I have to rewind here because there was also the really crazy summer of Moyes when it looked like
Rooney was going there.
Was it? Yeah. So was that when that first started, the Mata thing?
Yeah.
I think it might. I mean, this shows. Yeah, so I can remember. I think we were on tour. It was Moyes had taken them to Thailand, Bangkok. They had a game then. Yeah. We were in Sydney for a game, and this whole thing, sort of ignited with Rooney. I mean, I could go into what the whole Rooney thing.
And then supposedly Fabregas was on his way. Woodward was flying to Australia to sign him up any minute now. The longest flight ever between the UK and Australia, wasn't it?
A funny footnote to that is, or part of the story was, in Bangkok, Chelsea team happened to be in the same hotel as we were staying. It was quite funny while all that was going on. It doesn't always happen that you're in, because they were also on tour there. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I remember there's another summer. Who's the guy who's, I think is it Vidal, the midfielder who is now, where is he now? Is he at Barcelona?
He's at Barca, yeah.
So there was a summer, not that summer, but there was a summer. It might have been the Galactical summer when Falcao and Di Maria went to Manchester United.
He was supposed to come under Van Gaal.
Right, yeah. There was a summer where kept on being told he's not coming, and they kept on being these stories. I don't know where they were coming from. That he was definitely, and he never came. But that was quite a crazy summer. I mean, I think that they didn't want him because he had I think he was unsure about his knee. I think at the time, yeah. But it's interesting talking about transfers because so there was that Galactical summer, as we sort of called it, and then there was the one with Schweinsteiger. There was Pogba. So what I'm trying to say is, in the sort of 8 years since Ferguson went, I think it's difficult to find more than, say, 2 unbelievable players that Manchester United have managed to sign. And the 2 for me, apart from Ibrahimovic, who was a free, it's Pogba and Fernandes. And this has been part of the problem, really, at United, which they themselves admit, which the recruitment's not been great. It really hasn't. I mean, in 8 years, you should be signing more than sort of 2 proper Manchester United quality players. And I think they sort of sorted that out a bit now. Last summer. So before last summer, I'm talking about. Yeah. But so Fernandes is world class. Pogba is, but Maguire, Wan-Bissaka, and James look to, and it's basically been the problem at the club. I mean, it is quite simple in a way. The problem's there, which is the recruitment's been bad, and it's interesting when Fernandes came in. I know he only had 9 games before the football was suspended because of COVID. But he just looked. He looked a little bit like. He looked very good, but he also looked to do what sort of Van Persie did when he arrived, which was elevate the other players around him. make them better. Fernandes, I'm talking about here, like Van Persie did in August 2012. And that's kind of, suddenly you could see, wow, this team might be really going someplace. And that's why I'm fascinated if the football does restart here. Hopefully it will be. Everyone has to stay safe, obviously. But to see if United can continue it, how they left off, because it was starting to look kind of the most promising since Ferguson left.
Since you talked about Fernandes, people in Pakistan and all over the world, United fans, get really anxious because we get to hear rumors that ABC player is coming, and United is haggling over 5 million, 2 million. Like the whole Bruno Fernandes saga went on for the entire summer. Then we got him in January. Even during the January window, we had 20 days where we were waiting. So why does that happen, especially with United?
Good question. It kind of, listen, each particular transfer is individual to itself. So, there will be a particular story or plot twist or whatever that maybe why this one works, this one doesn't. Excuse me. I think with Fernandes, they liked him last summer, and they might have gone for him last summer. This is just my information on it, but then never. Now, why? You said that 20-day thing there. Always. Well, I think part of it is they didn't want to pay basically, what they were being asked for. So it's a negotiation thing, which kind of goes back to this Manchester United premium idea, where selling clubs see them coming and okay, it's United, let's try and get whatever. But it is interesting because ifs, buts, and maybes. If they had signed him last summer, who knows? What would have happened? Would Pogba have been a heck of a lot happier? Because suddenly he's got another very good player around him, and you know what I mean. My argument, my view of Pogba is if he was at City or Liverpool, where he wasn't, he was just one of an amazing array of players. He wouldn't have had that sort of burden. And so what I'm trying to say is, you go back to Fernandes. If he'd arrived in the summer, maybe he wouldn't have had all these. I know he's been injured, but. With Pogba, I just wonder whether he's been looking at it thinking, well, I've been here 3-4 years, whatever it is, and it's not really going anywhere. So again, when football restarts, if he's playing, which he should be, because he should be fit, with Fernandes, you've got Rashford flying. I think he had 19 goals all competitions before football paused. Will we see a far happier, better Pogba? But yeah, to go back to Fernandes, transfers it's very rare, you identify a player, and the next time you could buy him, the next window, you get him straight away. It just doesn't happen because of money, basically. Usually, it's a bit of a generalisation, but usually when there's an issue, it's down to some sort of money argument, I think.
Since you talk about Fernandes joining in the summer, maybe we could have been in the top 3 or top 4 if he had been in there in the summer. You never know.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. If you look at the gap now, what is it, 8 points to Leicester in third?
Yeah. And 3 to right? Chelsea. Yeah, 3 to Chelsea and 8 to Leicester.
Yeah, so yeah, that's kind of what I mean. He just looks a very good player, kind of what United have needed for about 5 years.
So, Jamie, I'm going to ask, as you can tell from my beard, I'm a bit more old school than the younger lot. In your time with covering United, you say 8 years. So obviously it's 4 different managers now. You've completely different personalities. Obviously, Sir Alex, David Moyes, Ryan Giggs, Louis van Gaal, Jose Mourinho, now Ole. It's 5. Is the manager in any way responsible for how the club is with you as journalists? Is under each manager, is the communication different, or is that something the communication department handles and the manager has no say with how they are? Because Sir Alex was all powerful. These guys have not really been so. How is that different?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I think each manager, they are, United's definitely a club where the manager is still. So let's say City, they have a director of football, or elsewhere. Those clubs would always argue that, because it's been said to me actually about Guardiola, he's not the most important person at the club, even though I actually think he is, because he's so good and all the rest of it. They would say it's the structure headed by the director of football at that club, Begiristain. But at United, it's still a manager is the manager. So he's the manager, he's the director of football, he's the chief scout, and he's also in charge of how they want to be media-wise. So he definitely drives that. And that, so Moyes, for example, very suspicious, interesting sort of individual characteristics, but very suspicious of TV cameras. David Moyes, believe it or not, he was more comfortable with written press. People like me, to such an extent that he was suspicious of MUTV, which is obviously the in-house, the club, which is a little bit interested if if you're not too keen on your actual in-house TV channel that are obviously on your side. Van Gaal, Van Gaal, I think was loved at the club. He's he's a very nice man, but publicly a little bit wary of journalists. So that sets the tone that way. Mourinho, well, where do you start with Jose Mourinho? I mean, I bring this up because you asked. Do you remember the respect thing?
Yeah,
do you
absolutely.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Right. So I happened to be the person he said that to because it was my question about when United lost to Spurs in the second game of that season. So it was the first home game. I think it's August bank holiday. I won't go into it in too much detail, but basically they lost. I think was it 3-0?
3-0, yeah.
Yeah, and he said, "Well, we lost 3-0." I'm paraphrasing, but look at how the fans still applauded us. To which I said, "Well, if you're using fans as a barometer of how well you played," that's what he was saying. Well, what about all the ones who left early? Because there was a lot left early. What does that say? And that's when he blew up. Now that's I know not just that, all sorts of different things. The way in which Mourinho was with the media did not go down particularly well at the club. He caused, internally, he wasn't the most unifying, and I'm being polite, but also, it's Manchester United. They like to think they've got a bit of class, the way in which they, I said to you, I can't remember if it was on or off air, but about how friendly a club it is to go and work there, yeah? So when that was going on, listen, their first concern isn't journalists, but their first concern, publicly, is to be polite and classy. And this guy, for whatever reason, wasn't presenting the best image, and that's him doing that. So that kind of, I'm answering your question here a little bit about who drives the sort of media policy, and with Solskjaer, Solskjaer to a certain extent, it's quite simple. What you see, the way he is kind of, he's a nice guy, and having done this biography of him and talking to people from throughout his life, because obviously it's biography from when he was born essentially to now. So he's always been the same. He's always been friendly. I've not had anyone say to me, "Oh, he can be a bit like this." But also my own experience of him, when I compare it to the other managers, tells me this as well. My first-hand experience, and that I know has gone down really well at the club because they want, and that's lifted the club. In the end, a football club is like most workplaces, and maybe a football club's also got an extra thing, or an added dimension, which is a little bit more like a family because of the sort of nature of what's going on. It's professional, of course, it's a business. But at the same time, there's a sporting element that I always think is about emotions and about how you feel. And, that's very important on the pitch. It's also very important off the pitch. And he lifted the mood when he came in there post-Mourinho. And it's still the same, really. Even when, and there's been a few of these, even when it's been very, really bad, the results, and, you're thinking, oh, crumbs, is this guy going to survive? He's always basically been the same. I'm not saying he's been happy about losing, of course not, but he's not been sour or...
Not changed his demeanour, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that has gone down well at the club because that shows a certain amount of class. And that's how they, that's how they want to project themselves. So, it is a manager-first club there, which I happen to think, whatever you say about director of football, I understand the arguments for them, why you have them. But in the end, if you get the right manager, you don't really need a director of football because you need that person, maybe, whatever you want to call them, to sort of sign off the deals. But, if you look at Guardiola at City, I also cover City, and, he's basically a manager like Ferguson was in terms of the power he has. You mentioned that at the start of this question, Ferguson was the old power. But Guardiola, because of his success and how good he is, he sort of is the director of football in terms of, right, I want that player for this reason. Please, can you try and get, that type. And so...
He's the one making the decisions. It's just other people going out and doing it for him.
And Solskjaer, to be fair to Woodward, so I did that story I mentioned to you about the director of football back 2 years ago nearly. And now, then it became a technical director, I think. And now it's kind of, it's not really a priority. But to be fair to them, they've done that because of what happened last summer with the players that they got, that Solskjaer, identified he has a veto on any sort of suggestion from the football department. And because they can see that the recruitment was good there and where it's going moving forward, you know, they've decided, well, actually, at the moment, we don't need one. And I think that's smart, you know. Don't do something just because you said it once and you feel like you can't lose face by changing your mind. Be big enough to, okay, right, that's what we thought we needed then when Mourinho was there and we got into that final season and we weren't too sure if he was happy or not. I mean, well, they knew he wasn't. You know, so maybe we need an over. But now it's changed. So, yeah, I mean, you know, with Solskjaer, I think you will see the next window, let's call it a summer window, even if it might, I mean, who knows what's going to happen with the transfer window, but, you know, whenever the next time he can buy players, I think you'll see him getting maybe 3 players at least. And I would say it'd be a striker or somebody who can score 20-odd goals in the Premier League, you know, guaranteed to go along with Rashford. It looks like he can, and you're going to probably look at a midfielder and maybe another centre-back, and then let's see what the team is like.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay, so Jamie, there's a fan question. It's from Suhaib Anwar. Since he breaks these transfer stories, how much it differs in the reaction of fans of top 6 club fans to take the news? Either if it goes true or not, especially in the case of players where 2 top 6 clubs are interested. Like you said, Maguire, City were apparently also interested in him. How much do the trolls and abuse change your next stories? Does it have any impact?
So, did you say trolls and abusers, did you say?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
That doesn't have any impact. Listen, how can I say it? No one, you know, if someone's really rude to me, my basic rule on Twitter, if someone's really rude to me, right, I just mute them. So they never know that they've been muted because they don't know, but they're still, you know, I think there's a certain, you know, so they're still hurling, there'll be people still hurling abuse at me from sort of 7 years ago, you know, because I've muted them. If it's really bad, I'll block them. But the sort of more general point is it comes with the territory a little bit. As long as you're not nasty, I don't mind. You know, if someone's... The other thing is I can remember when I wasn't a journalist and you know, when you don't know sometimes parts of a story that you can't report or you don't quite understand, you know, you're just seeing the information, aren't you, reading it? And everyone's different. They interpret stuff differently. So I like to think I can give a little bit of leeway for that. You know, people are reading that and thinking, wait a minute, I don't quite understand that, or he must have got it wrong. So I haven't got time or any inclination to be too upset about that. You know, I mean, if you're going to swear at me or be nasty, then I'll mute you. Yeah. Very rarely I'll block you. But otherwise, I can't remember anything anyone's ever said to me. You know, that's what I mean. It just becomes water off a duck's back. It's part of the job, really, just to sort of, yeah, okay. People care. You know, that's, as I said, as long as it's not nasty, fair enough. You know, at least they care.
I actually read the comments under your tweet about your biography, and they were mostly from the first week of January when you announced it. And so many comments were anti-Ole, Ole this, Ole that, and everyone was criticizing you basically for writing the story, and that Ole won't be here when the book comes out. But here we are, and I don't think that there's been any comments since the first week of January. Because we turned it around and the fans, they.
But you see, that is a classic example, right? Where you could go down the line and say, well, listen, it's a biography. It's not just about being at Manchester United. But then you just think, wait a minute. These people who responded, United fans, are not happy with Solskjaer for whatever reason. That's their right. Just as much as my right to write a biography. And part of that is because it's football, because people care so much. You're going to get people, you know, if he won the title for the last 3 years, there'd still be, well, there might not be many, but there might be the odd person going, oh, you know, he's been lucky. So I never respond to anyone on Twitter. So, of course, I see a bit. I expected it. I mean, you know, the team wasn't doing particularly well yet again. I mean, there's been many times where I thought, you know, he could lose his job here, but there's no point taking it too seriously. It's football. It matters. It doesn't matter. You know, that's what it's kind of how I always think about it. It's an amazing game. I absolutely love it, but at the same time, it is just a game, you know. And also, I'm not only going to Solskjaer. I'm not the guy. You know, I'm lucky enough to report on this amazing football team and write about them. You know, I'm lucky. So, looking, you know, it's part of the same thing. You're going to get people who love him, people who don't, and you know, it's because it matters to people, as I sort of said.
But we've always had this thing, haven't we, Jamie? I mean, we had people questioning Sir Alex right from the time he sold, you know, Hughes and Kanchelskis to bring in the class of 92, if a lot of those people had their way, there would be no class of 92 because they thought that you should have spent the money.
And what's interesting is those people there that you're talking about, or people who were sort of say, why have you written this biography? You don't hear from them when, Ferguson's doing well with Giggs and the Beckett, or...
Exactly.
Or, that's just, to a certain extent, that's kind of their right to sort of be a little bit whatever. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think you mentioned again before, there was 3 years when he didn't win a title, right? Ferguson, 2003, 2006. Yeah. They wanted him to go. I mean, this guy... If he'd finished in 1999, right, after the treble season, Ferguson, he'd still have a case for being the greatest ever, British manager ever, and that he carried on another 14 years after that. This is how good this guy
with success, continuous success. Yeah,
that's 100%. I mean, he probably built. He built, I'd say, 3 amazing teams, and he had 4 or 5 different title-winning teams, to sort of claim the 13. So you're always going to get that. I mean. Some people are more informed, some people are less. Also, the other thing is, and I think it's part of normal human impulse, is you're more likely to voice there seems to be more of a culture of voicing criticism, if I can generalise, than there is of sort of praise. So, certainly on somewhere like Twitter anyway. It's just the way it goes, sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, if you're questioning Sir Alex Ferguson, then you're probably not a proper fan of Manchester United or football. I don't know.
I absolutely remember, because I'm older than the rest of the lads, but I remember when we signed Michael Carrick, and at that time I was, I was playing football semi-regularly with my friends, and the guys who supported the other clubs said, what a waste of money. What can he do? He can't run, he can't shoot, he can't tackle. They said, I've never seen a more useless signing in the history of the Premier League. This guy is going to...
Wow.
And I remember one of them saying to me clearly, he said, you're going to be lucky if you make top 10 with this bloke, because he's the most overrated midfielder. And then what comes in, he heralds a season in 3 consecutive Premier Leagues. He's integral to the whole thing. And I keep going back to, he can't tackle, he can't pass. A, you're wondering who watches football if they think Michael Carrick can't pass. And B, it just shows you that, people back then thought, 15 million, 16 million, was it? I remember there were even journalists who said that Levy has ripped Alex Ferguson off. And you look at it, it's one of the best signings the club has ever made.
If he's Spanish or grown up in Spain, he's probably taking Busquets' place in that Barcelona, that amazing Barcelona side. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, I mean, and that to a certain extent is kind of what you have to remember a little bit. I mean, people who have those views, I don't think they're just a bit, they're allowed their opinion, but it doesn't mean to say it's necessarily the most prudent or kind of, I mean, Carrick, I think he won everything, Carrick, right, with them, didn't he? I mean,
he did. Him and Rooney.
So, there's the sort of, there's the answer, really. So, I mean, Fernandez, I'm sure. I have seen the odd thing about. He's only had. Who is he? He's had 7 or 8 games. But it's like, well, it's not his fault. He's only been able to play sort of 8 or 9 games, whatever it is. He's done all right. It's a good start.
Exactly.
No one's saying he's Pele or Lionel Messi. Just so far, he looks amazing, and that's all you can judge to a certain extent.
Okay. Along this same lines, there's another question from Naman Zahir, and. He says, obviously, you've been a journalist for 20 odd years. So how has the introduction of Twitter and social media impacted your scope of work? Is it easier now?
Great question. Well, for kind of what some of the reasons we were just discussing, it's made it more interesting. I actually think it's added a whole sort of different, vibrant dimension. I really love it. Has it made it easier? Maybe a little bit. I'll tell you what's made it easier, actually. It's easier to contact people now a little bit, or to know if they're around, if I can put it that way. So let's say I'm trying to track, I don't know, an ex-player of United's just to ask him about a season or something. Then, 10 years ago, before Twitter, whenever it was, 12 years ago, let's say, before Twitter was really a thing, you'd do it by phone numbers, if I can put it this way, the old-fashioned way. Now, you can look on Instagram, you can look on Twitter. Instagram's an interesting one. That seems to be more of a go-to now for, let's say, famous people, footballers, whoever it might be, than Twitter. They are on there, but often it's actually quite rare. So yeah, it's made that part. It's made, contacting people has definitely made it a little bit easier. Not to say they always will respond to you, but I mean in terms of the actual job, the sort of getting stories, not really. No, it's what's changed is the platforms. Yeah, stuff goes out on Twitter almost. Unless something's really sort of exclusive, it'll often go out on Twitter first. But you're still dealing in the same thing, which is information. You're still trying to keep people informed, give them something a little bit different. If it's a feature. Now it's website driven rather than, when I first started in 2002, sort of 18 years ago, it was obviously, there was still, the Guardian was always ahead with website, but it was still mainly newspaper first. But be interested to see where it goes, where it'll be in sort of 50 years time with all this, it's always evolving, but the actual core business of journalism is the same, which is information, right? You're trying to pass on information to people that's hopefully interesting for them.
Okay, so Tarad.
Right. So Jamie, what I wanted to ask is that ever since print media has become such a big thing and social media has also become such a big thing, so whenever you interview a player or a manager, all of those statements are very hard to portray in an article. Like you could not maybe portray the body language or the tone of voice,
yes,
if it was a jest or if somebody was being serious. So how difficult is it for a journalist to make sure that you're not misrepresenting the person you're interviewing, and you're also creating intrigue amongst the community?
Yeah, it's another very good question. So basically, there's sort of two main stories or type of stories you'll do. One is a news story, and one is a feature. Now, in news, if someone's joking, this is a discussion we have. As soon as basically, not about every story, but often. So let's say Solskjaer's press conference, regular weekly press conference, while the season's obviously going, it's on a Friday. It's crumbs, I've forgotten. It's been that long. I think it's 10 o'clock, is it, or 9:30? It's either 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning. I think it's 9:30 in the morning every Friday, right? So the first part of that is embargoed till 10, so half an hour later. So that means you can put it on the website from 10 o'clock. The second part is embargoed till 10:30 that evening, Friday evening. And that's for the newspaper to keep something fresh. So you might say something about, let's say he was discussing Rashford's back ones, and he sort of say, "Oh yeah, it'd be yeah." That was what he said. He said something like it'd be a surprise, or he probably, he may not be back again this season. This is before the season was paused, obviously. Yeah. So with that, it's straight, yeah. It's straight. He said that, and the body language to a certain extent doesn't matter, because he's saying something which, what's important is the words. As long as the words are correct, reporting them faithfully, and he's saying them seriously, then there's no need for the rest of that. But there are often occasions where, and it's interesting, sometimes managers will say something as a joke, and then just to make sure that you understand, they'll say, yeah, that's a joke. So you have to be ethical about it. You have to report faithfully. Now, if it's a feature, which are often, or can be often, more about, a player, the mood of a player, or if, say, if you had a bad injury, or they've had a loss of form, or the team's not doing very well, then yeah, that's when it then, because then you're sort of painting more of a portrait of the sort of atmosphere of that player and the team at the time. So that's when you will do it more. I'm just trying to think of an example. Listen, there's no hard and fast rules. It's a bit like what I said about the transfer stories. You have to take each press conference, each story, each feature, each interview, as a sort of self-contained entity, and just try and, report it, and how it was meant. And again, at the Guardian, we're very sort of careful to do that. I tell you, one of the things that I didn't realise until I became a journalist was when I used to read a story in a newspaper, when I was a kid or whenever, I would think that the order in which I read whatever the person was saying, that was kind of the order in which it was said, at the time. And it was, and also, so when you read a feature or an interview, you sort of say, I don't know, I remember doing one with Luke Shaw, and it was at the training centre, and sort of say he's sitting there and then he'll say this and he might, it doesn't, you put it together as a story. So it doesn't actually happen necessarily in the way in which, it didn't happen in real life, how you actually present it. And I found that quite jarring at first. I was like, wait a minute, I thought it was, and maybe this is part of the nub of your question. I at first thought, well, if someone said, I scored this goal and I felt great at the end of the conversation, but you're putting it at the top, how does that work? And it took me a little while, and I don't know if that's anything that ever crosses, your minds, but it certainly did mine. So there are conventions, and there are sort of, conventions, or kind of the way in which almost like a journalistic language or sort of way of doing things. But generally, the point is to make sure you report faithfully, as you would, including your question, the way in which someone felt about something, and you just don't misreport it. Really, it's quite simple to a certain extent.
Okay, so Jamie, is it okay if I ask a few transfer questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so obviously Sancho has been mentioned a lot. So is there any update on his deal, and do you think he will eventually move?
Well, the last I sort of knew anything half concrete on it was the last window, January, and he was then he was sort of out of the team a little bit. But I was just looking at the charts the other day. I think he's the second highest scorer in the Bundesliga behind Lewandowski. So that shows, for a player who's a bit in and out of the team, I think Lewandowski was 20 odd, and I think Sancho, it might be third actually after Timo Werner. It might say 13 goals. So anyway, he certainly would like to join United. I think they've got one, let's say, marquee signing in them this summer. Kane, who was someone that they would like, I don't think it's going to happen because it really would be silly money for him. But I think Sancho, like I say about Sancho, I think that they certainly would like him. He would like to go there, but this is where the sort of, there's also, I'm not too sure Dortmund want to sell him now. And also there's a whole thing about what he would actually cost, which is kind of, they probably have got the money for him. So I think it's a 50-50 of it happening. I think it's certainly not dead. Whereas Kane is kind of, listen, as I said to you earlier at the start, it could change after I've said this next sentence, but the latest at the moment is Kane, no way. Sancho, yes, that's a live issue, but whether it happens, I'm not so sure. But what they do need though, right, is they need, as I said to you earlier, they need a player who can, add some stardust but score a lot of goals, because it's basically, I think there was a Van Gaal season when they only scored 49 in the league. I mean, that's the last season that they won the league.
No home goal for 3 months.
Van Persie scoring 20. Yeah. So, and I think the last time we won the league, I think it was 85 goals. City have scored 100. You need to. It sounds obvious, but you need to score a lot more goals than United have been doing, really. So they need another. Yeah. I mean, Greenwood, to me, he might be the answer, but not next season necessarily. Listen, he scored 11 goals, I think it is, this year. That's brilliant for an 18-year-old who's just started. That's amazing. I think it's the best in Europe for a teenager. But you can't really rely on him necessarily. So I think that, I think they do need a Sancho. Whether Sancho could come and pot, 21, 22 Premier League goals, I'm not so sure. But he's, he certainly looks like, I personally would go all out for, if they're saying they can't, well, that's information. But I don't know, Harry Kane, not only do you get the 20 odd goals, but you get a leader, you get another captain to go with, like, Fernandes and Maguire. Who are sort of big personalities. De Gea in his own way. You get another, because I think that's all United's brilliant teams. You've had massive, not just talents, but sort of personalities. Ronaldo, Tevez, Rooney. That side. Ferdinand, Vidic. Evra. You can go further back. Keane. That crop. Beckham. Just these phenomenal sort of personalities as well. So yeah.
Robson, Sir Alex used to say these guys can start a fight in an empty room, and he felt it was integral to what they did. That hunger, and, like you mentioned, the leadership.
I don't know if you any of you gentlemen have Netflix, but there's a series about Michael Jordan, a documentary series called The Last Dance.
Yes, The Last Dance.
I don't know if you've heard of this or are watching it, but because of the access there, you can really see that you've got these big personalities. You've got Rodman. What personality he is. You've got Scottie Pippen. You've got you've got the coach. It sounds an obvious thing to say, but all these big teams, they're almost like they sort of manage themselves to a certain extent. Yeah. That's why Chelsea did so well when they sort of kept on changing after Mourinho, Ancelotti, Avram Grant, Villas Boas, Mourinho again. It didn't really matter who the manager was because, you had John Terry, you had Drogba, you had Petr Cech, you had Frank Lampard. And so to go back to Kane, that's why I kind of like the look of him as a signing for you, because I just thought he would give you that. He's the England captain for a reason, I remember a game, I can't remember, at the start of the season, he played United, and I don't think he scored, but Harry Kane, he scored about 4 years, but I just thought he's actually a very good creative player. He was the best player that day, but it was more as a number 10. He was playing centre forward, but what his contribution was like a number 10, and I thought, right, I didn't realise he could play like that as well. So, anyway, so to go back to Sancho, I think there's that's a live one that I would watch that space.
But when you speak about goals, Martial has 17, Rashford has 19, Greenwood has 12. So do you think we need a first-team striker, or what are your views and any reports on Ighalo staying?
Well, Ighalo, it's interesting because, you thought, well, he was at Watford and now he's playing in the Chinese league. But the more I looked at that as a sort of loan, I thought he was very smart because he knew the Premier League. He'd done one pretty good season for Watford, didn't it? He was the top scorer at the Cup of African Nations. And Solskjaer knew him from the Norway League as well. So when you started to put all this stuff together, and the fact that he came in, obviously, really, really keen and, hungry. And then, I think he scored. Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, and he sort of gave them kind of what United needed was just a different option, basically, and an experience. So I think I think they may well sign him. I don't think it cost too much. I mean, he scored. What did he score? He scored 4 goals in the end. I mean, he scored a cracker. The last game that United played last. I did that game.
He scored 5 or 6 now. Yeah,
but I think when you look at Ighalo, for me, the biggest difference he makes is, like you mentioned, something different. We got a lot of fast, tricky players. It's a big, strong lad. And then we look at the Scott McTominay goal against City. It's not possible without Ighalo's hold-up and vision. Scott gets all the credit, brilliant goal. But without Ighalo coming on, none of the other guys could do it. And like you said, he knows the Premier League. He knows the manager. He fits the profile. And he seems like a guy who really he cares. He wants to do well for United, which is great.
Yeah, yeah. And this is part of what Solskjaer's building is that sort of culture where I think to a certain extent it's kind of why Lukaku went. I think he wasn't particularly impressed with his attitude, if I could put it that way, or what he was bringing to the team. Whereas Ighalo, so it's a little bit of a mini masterstroke that I think it's sort of you want your manager to be deft in the transfer market, to pull the odd rabbit where you think, well, that's a bit left field, and then it works. Ferguson did it, didn't he? He did it with Larson, for example. Yeah.
Chicharito.
I even think, listen, Cantona was a known player, but even being able to bring Cantona for, was it $1 million or $1.5 million? I mean, that basically started the whole thing.
$1.1 million,
yeah. So, again, I think that's another thing in Solskjaer's favour. There was a lot. I don't know if you had it in Pakistan, but there was a bit of derision in England on these shows about the Ighalo thing. Oh, they're desperate. It's a loan deal. I never said this, but inverted commas, he's a Watford reject. And then again, suddenly people are going, oh, actually, that's quite a decent bit of business that from in January, for when it's difficult. So, this is why if I was, I'm not actually a United fan. I'm a sort of Forest lapsed fan, but if I was a United fan or someone who reports on the club, I'm very interested, stroke excited to see what happens next with this team and this manager, because I think this is the other good thing about United have actually given him some proper time. Solskjaer, it would have been so easy, right? Let's say when you didn't win, was it from I don't know, you didn't win towards the end of last season. I think only won one in the last 13 or something. Basically, and then you went, there was a loss against Burnley. There was there's a few times where he could have been sacked, but Woodward stroke the Glazers or whoever the board thought, no, we're going to actually give him some time, and you can see the benefits of it now. What he's trying to build. So for that reason alone, I hope it works, because I think United deserve a bit of praise for actually sticking. If I'd been at Chelsea, for example, I'm not sure it would have happened. And given the sort of misfiring under Moyes, and Van Gaal wasn't great. I know you won the FA Cup with Mourinho. Yeah, you won a couple of cups. You can't argue with that. But there was never really a cohesive vision or plan or vision. Like, where are we actually going in 2, 3, 4 years' time with this? And that for me, going back to Ibrahimovic, very good signing for you. Don't get me wrong, especially a free, but that's too short term for me. That what did that say about United? If the answer is, and no disrespect to Ibrahimovic, is a 34, 35-year-old guy. I don't know. If he'd been bought as an option, but he'd been bought as the answer, hadn't he, really? And it's like, it was okay for a season or two, but it's not really, you're not building a team that, all good teams are teams, aren't they? If you lose a player, you can bring another person in, and hopefully it continues. That's what City, sorry to say it to you, that's kind of what they've been doing really well. They've got a proper team squad. So anyway, I think that's kind of what Solskjaer is, is really, you can see what he's trying to do.
Jamie, if I can ask something related to that, what was it with Moyes, Van Gaal, and Mourinho that it went completely differently to what Ole has done? I mean, they would all put it out there that it's all Ed Woodward. That's what we ever hear, is that Ed Woodward and Matt Judge are the guys who sign people. Moyes has no idea who's being signed. Van Gaal didn't want half of them. Mourinho says, I wanted a centre back every week. Never got one. So how come they all, didn't have this vision? Like you said, short-termism, and also the wannabe Galactico project. And clearly Ole has a plan, like you said. Did they not have a plan, or was it that the club itself at that time was confused?
I think there's an element of correctness in all the things you bring up there. I think Woodward stroke, the hierarchy there, I admit that Moyes, they did him no favours that summer. If the only player you could bring in is Fellaini, who, and actually for 3 or 4 million more than his release clause, because, you think the one thing David Moyes could do would pull off that deal because he knew what the contract was, because he had him at Everton, he was his manager. If that's what you're doing as a club that summer when Ferguson has left, it's going to be so difficult anyway. That is not great. So I think there has been a really, really bad, and I'm being polite, recruitment up until last summer.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes back to the director of football thing. They felt that we have to do something here. So Moyes, it's a combination of Moyes not being the deftest. Is that a word? Not being particularly great in the market himself. Plus the club being, Woodward being very green. Just taken over from David Gill. Van Gaal, I don't really think there was a long-term vision there. Mourinho has never been a long-term vision guy. I mean, apart from Porto, he's never really built a team from not scratch, but you know what I mean. He's always sort of walked. If you look at what he inherited from Ranieri the first time at Chelsea, John Terry was there, Lampard. Cech had been signed before he came. So he wasn't really. Where Solskjaer has learned from Ferguson, and what they did, I think after all those missteps that of those managers, I think they just decided, right, we need to sort of, what we're doing wrong. We've got to be honest. What have we done wrong? Recruitment. What else have we done wrong? Not just recruitment of players, recruitment of the wrong kind of manager. We need a manager who kind of, a bit like a Gallo, you said, there's the family United, who kind of loves United, gets it, and has the right idea about the sort of players and football. All this stuff sounds simple, right? I mean, any of us here could sort of say in May 2013 when Ferguson walks out, the kind of players United should be signing and the kind of manager you should have. But I've got to be honest, when Moyes was announced, I thought, that's quite refreshing. They haven't gone for Mourinho at the time. They haven't gone for, they've gone for a sort of a guy who kind of knows the league. He'll know United. Anyway, it obviously didn't work.
You reckon we should have gone for Sam Allardyce? He reckons he would have had a trouble every year.
Yeah, we won't be having this conversation, will we? Kevin Nolan would still be playing for you, of course. But yeah, I mean, where I thought, there might be something here with Solskjaer, was his very first press conference as United caretaker manager, and I thought, he's going to be a little bit nervous here. It's going to be a little bit, why wouldn't you be? It was like he was at home, but that's because he is at home in his his own way. He looks at United. He loves the place. So he's sitting there and he was absolutely enjoying it. I thought, wait a minute, he's the most natural of any guy since Ferguson, sitting there in front of us lot who asks all these questions, silly or otherwise. He's just the most natural. It's just that makes it, if you're natural there and your first one, then that means he's walking around the place feeling at home. We know he knew all the players as you. So it was apprenticeship. Being in charge, he coached that forward line I mentioned of Tevez, Ronaldo, and Rooney. He helped coach them. Not that they needed much coaching, but you understand what I mean. He was part of that. Then he did the reserves with Warren Joyce. He won a title 2009-10, the Premier League reserve. So he'd done all that at United, and then and so. I think they finally sort of struck gold a little bit. Even if it doesn't work with Solskjaer, I think it will. But I think they've sort of, this is the direction for them now. Even if it had gone really bad under Solskjaer and he still wasn't the manager, I'd still say this is the way most clubs should go. It's got to be the right person, but get someone who was a great, an important player or who loves. It could be Bayern Munich, it could be the team I like, Forest, but someone who was there, someone who's bright, and go with them, because immediately, I don't know, it counts for something. I said earlier that football is a business, but it is also to do with emotion. And I think where the emotion comes in is that sort of feeding off the fans and sort of, it gives you a little bit extra leeway, a little bit more time, which is very precious in football. If you are a fan favourite as a player or someone, who plays for the club and the fans like, if it's not going so well, you get a little bit extra time. I just think it's important. And I think, as I say, if it doesn't work under Solskjaer, they should... they should continue this way.
Okay, so Jamie, you've mentioned a striker, a midfielder, and a CB that we need. So any potential names that we've been linked with or are close or anything out in the market?
Right. So there was a player last week. Who was it? Crumbs. Complete mind blank that I checked out. The guy at Lyon. Is it Dembele?
Musa. The one at Marseille? No,
Lyon. Musa.
The guy who's at Celtic. Yeah.
Musa.
Yeah. So so he's obviously a forward. I'm told there isn't anything in that, and that's why I think the Sancho thing is, in terms of if you're looking at midfielders. I mean, there's been a couple mentioned here. Madison. Are they both like Madison? No, it's Madison.
Grealish.
The guy. Yeah. So of those two, I think I'm not sure. I'm not completely sure if they are massive first choices. Because what happens is, they'll have 5 or 6 players for each position, and obviously it'll be there'll be first and second and third choice. And I'm not too sure how high up the list Madison and Grealish are. Of the two, I prefer Madison. But what I would say is, what Solskjaer's been good at, I think, is not just buying a player to have a player. Now, it kind of nearly really killed him when they got rid of Lukaku, and they didn't replace him as a striker last summer. And then Rashford gets injured and Crumbs what they're going to do. Yeah. But again, that was to do with a long-term vision thing. So what I'm saying is, if it comes down to it, and it's I'm not saying it's easy to get Madison, but if it's Madison or Grealish or no one, and he doesn't really fancy either of those two, I don't think he'll do it. So this is where it's difficult for a manager, because fans want players, but it's very, you're always going to get a player who's... So Di Maria is a really good example. When I interviewed Van Gaal about this time last year, Di Maria is a British record, 59.3, was it? 59.7. He didn't want him, he basically told me. He said he didn't really want... He said something like he wanted him... he was a good player when he had him at AZ, but he didn't want it really for United. He wasn't his first choice. And that's he was a record transfer. And that's the kind of harem scarum world of transfers.
Yeah.
So put it another way, with Fred coming through, looking like he can do it now. That's why I think a priority's got to be, and is, a sort of 20 league goal a season forward, if I could put it that way. And that's why they went for Haaland, because they thought Haaland was going to do it. Obviously, that never happened because of the agent, sort of silly demands. Raiola, I think they're sick of Raiola, basically, because of the Pogba thing. But yeah, I think, if you can get a forward in with 20-odd goals, or they think can get them 20 league goals, then I think then they wouldn't be too unhappy if they didn't get... I still think you need a centre-back as well, because I think beyond Lindelof and Maguire, Bailly's a good player, but he's injured. Jones isn't really in the picture. Smalling's been on loan. So what I mean? I think you look a little bit light there. But, I just think at the moment, if they can get a forward, I think that's where they're really focusing, and they'll see what else they can get in another position if it comes to it.
Yeah, but one position you haven't talked about is our goalkeeper position. Obviously, De Gea is a world-class goalkeeper, but Dean Henderson is doing quite well. Yeah. So, are there any plans to bring him back?
Well, they may well bring him. See, Romero's a really good number 2, isn't he? I mean, I don't think he's going to come back as a number 1 now. I think that he will probably have another season out on loan, Henderson. Who knows in football? But I think De Gea, is he the player he was? Can he be the player he was again? You'd like to think yes to the last question, but I think they still, Solskjaer still considers him the number 1. Very different being Sheffield United or whoever's goalkeeper to being Manchester United's goalkeeper. It had, could be a bit of a graveyard there. You had Bartes struggled on occasion. Bosnich, for whatever reason, Taibbi, I could go on. I mean, even the last sort of title-winning season, De Gea struggled a bit. And I think he got dropped for Lindegaard for a few games. So I think Henderson probably is on loan again for another season.
Okay, so I think we'll end it here. We've taken a lot of Jamie's time, and it's been an absolute education, obviously, learning about how the transfers work and all the transfer market as well. So does anyone else have any questions?
No, I just want to say thank you, Jamie. I had to go because my electricity went, which is something that happened.
Okay.
He knows that he's in Pakistan.
So we just want to say thank you so much for being here. I hope we see you again in Pakistan very soon.
I hope so,
take you out for a proper meal in Lahore, Multan, wherever we'd absolutely look forward to that. And, the only thing I want to ask is, was there ever any truth to those rumors about Wesley Sneijder? Because we're still waiting.
Wow, Wesley Sneijder's a good one.
13 years and counting now, is
He's
it?
Still on loan. He's still on
loan. Maybe at one point. I mean, you came close to getting... He was a Real Madrid guy. He was the midfield, a very good player. Cruz was kind of nailed on at one point. I think there's more chance of him. But... no, I mean, there was one which became a bit of a joke amongst all us journalists. What's his name?
Nicholas Gaitan.
Not Sneijder. Yes, Gaitan.
Yes. Every single summer. I mean, I was so convinced that I almost bought one of his shirts because every year he's replacing Giggs, he's replacing Ronaldo, he's replacing Sir Alex.
You know what, right? That got so ridiculous. Not me, but at least one journalist colleague who I won't name actually got told that if you continue to write this story about Gaitan coming, you won't be welcome at the club. So United got a little bit sick about it. But, the humour involved here is, this is kind of one of the reasons why I like doing the job, because some of it is quite interesting, stroke funny. Some of the things that go on behind the scenes that you can't necessarily... but what I would say is there might be the odd little nugget in my biography of Solskjaer, of this sort of thing.
Can't wait.
I'm going to say it, not the shenanigans, but the sort of cabaret of football.
Can't wait.
But yes, I'm not. There's always one. Maybe Sancho will become the new Sneijder. Who knows?
Oh God, I hope not.
He's only 20. I can't be this for another 30.
Yeah, I think they're going to keep doing it until he retires. So.
But listen, thank you. Can I just say thank you very much?
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for asking me on.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute honor.
Thanks a lot.
Speak soon.
Thanks.
Thank you. All the best. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.